18-year-old Giovani Peller vanished in Florida after sending his mom one chilling text, "Mom, help." Hours later, he's running alone down a dark road, almost hit by traffic, and a week later, his body is found in a pond. No signs of violence.
We have been following 18-year-old Giovani Peller's disappearance for months, the North Carolina teen who vanished in Florida after sending his mom a chilling text that read, "Mom, help." And in the hours after he was picked up by relatives, reports emerged of frantic, erratic behavior, and later, video captured him running along the road that night, nearly getting hit by traffic. And now, the autopsy report has finally revealed how he died. We are going to break it all down with a homicide investigator. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse. We have been following this strange and heartbreaking case of 18-year-old Giovani Peller for months now, the North Carolina teen who vanished in Florida after being picked up by relatives and whose last text to his mom simply said, "Mom, help." His body was found a week later in a retention pond, too decomposed for immediate identification, and that clearly left so many questions unanswered. But now, we are back with a new update, and it is an important update. The autopsy report has finally determined how Giovani died, and while some details remain murky, the findings reveal a tragic mix of accident and rare health complications, and apparently no evidence of foul play. I want to start from the beginning. Giovani Peller, 18-year-old from Raleigh, North Carolina, the oldest of 5 kids. In late July, he traveled to Florida with his mom, Bridget, her fiancé, and his siblings. The reason? You see, Giovani wanted to reconnect with his dad's side of the family. This is according to his mother. She told the media that he'd been born in Florida, lived there until about age 4, but had grown up mostly in North Carolina with his mom. And she said he was excited to get to know his paternal relatives, learn about his roots, spend time with family that he hadn't really seen for years. You fast forward to the early hours of Friday, August 1st. And according to the Manatee County Sheriff's Office, at around 1:30 a.m., Giovani was picked up in Englewood, Florida by a cousin and 2 of the cousin's friends. So the plan was to drive him about 3 hours to his grandfather's home in Brevard County. On paper, seems straightforward, right? Problem is, within just about half hour, things started to go sideways. Giovani apparently sent texts to his mom, 2 in total, and even tried calling her. The problem was she was asleep. And one of those texts was simple but alarming. Quote, "Mom, help." Now, his mom, who was busy studying for a pharmacy board exam, told reporters that she didn't see the messages until later that morning at around 6:20 a.m., along with a voicemail from Giovani's grandfather. The message from the grandfather suggested that there had been some sort of altercation during the ride and that Giovani had been left on the side of the road in Manatee County. Well, almost immediately after he went missing, the family launched a GoFundMe to aid in the search efforts. The post, it captured the desperation, the heartbreak that they were feeling. Written by Giovani's aunt, it reads, "Our family is living a nightmare. My 18-year-old nephew, Giovani Peller, has gone missing under deeply troubling and suspicious circumstances. The last time anyone heard from him, he sent a text to his mom that simply said, 'Mom, help.'" So his mother immediately tried to contact Giovani, but by the time she reached out, his phone and backpack had already been abandoned on the roadside. According to what she was told by the cousin who picked him up, the group had apparently smoked marijuana together after leaving Englewood, and Giovani reportedly began to act erratically, cursing, panicking, even allegedly pulling out a knife at one point. Now, the cousin said that they wrestled the knife away from him, and Giovani ran from the vehicle. Now, law enforcement reports, however, tell the story slightly differently. According to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, Giovani had exited the car on his own and started running along the interstate. And in a groundbreaking development that we previously covered, Sheriff Rick Wells said that deputies were able to pinpoint Giovani's location on traffic cameras. And though the footage is grainy, they say it shows him moving along the road and at one point, almost getting hit by a truck.
Point him out right here. He's coming eastbound now. He's walking back westbound. And there's a concrete barrier right here. And down here is where the pond is. So then we continue to check cameras. And we get lucky at a Lowe's, which is located on the west side of State Road 70. We have a camera that's pointing at the embankment. Now that he comes down at 2:19 a.m. Play that, Ben. And I want you to stay focused right here. Now that's a steep embankment. It's coming down there almost an uncontrollable sprint. If you've ever gone down a hill, you know what I'm talking about. But the pond is right here at the edge of that embankment. I mean, the important thing that I want you to see, there's no one chasing him. There's no one around him. In fact, when he's coming down that embankment, the vehicle is 2 miles away. So there's no one in this area with Giovani. There's no one that's chasing him. He's by himself. Now, what we don't know is what happened when he hit that pond. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. The death is undetermined. So we know that we don't have anyone that comes down that embankment after him. They don't look for him. He's there, we believe, until he was located by the family friend on Friday, the 8th. We really don't know what happened once he got into the pond. And once again, I think anything that I say would be pure speculation. We're still waiting for the ME to determine the cause of death, and we're also still waiting for the toxicology. So we don't have all the answers. We know this is the last sighting of him that night.
So while the cousin described this altercation inside the car, official investigators focused on the moments after he left that vehicle. But I will tell you that even if these accounts do differ, police did say Giovani's relatives were totally cooperative throughout the investigation. Now, meanwhile, his family, law enforcement, they coordinated searches across multiple counties. I'm talking deputies, K-9 units, drones, helicopters. They scoured the area. Family members, they launched search parties of their own. And despite these efforts, it took a week before a family friend found Giovani's body in a retention pond near I-75 and State Road 70. His condition was in such bad shape that they had to rely on dental records. But authorities were eventually able to confirm that it was in fact Giovani. And now, after months of uncertainty, there is finally a new development in Giovani's case. The medical examiner has determined a cause of death and a manner of death. But what does it really mean? How do experts interpret all the details from the autopsy, the toxicology report, the other evidence? That's what we want to talk about. Okay, so to help us break it down and what the new developments are, I want to bring on somebody who can walk us through exactly what all of this means from an investigative standpoint. I'm joined once again by homicide investigator Chris McDonough. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to see you. From your perspective, how unusual is it for a missing person case to involve this many jurisdictions, this amount of overlapping investigations? What are the advantages of that? What are the complications of that?
You know, this is a really interesting case, Jesse. I mean, the fact that you do have so many agencies involved, you have to now nail down who's going to be the point. And typically, wherever the body is found, then the coroner's office or the medical examiner's office will become point of contact for that. And then secondarily, wherever the victim originated, meaning if it's another jurisdiction, then they become the investigative agency. And if there are things like, different jurisdictions, then each agency then plays a part, but they're not necessarily the point or the tip of the spear.
And when I talk about challenges, I have to mention that when you hear that Giovani's remains were found after a week in a retention pond, how does that complicate finding out what happened? How does that complicate the investigation from a forensic standpoint?
Well, of course, the decomposition process depends on the heat, the moisture, and a variety of other factors that would play into it. The fact that there may be water in play here, if the body had, let's say, gone into that water, then immediately after death, the body will sink. And typically, anywhere from 7 to 10 days, that body will then resurface as it expands, unfortunately, because of gases and a variety of other situations taking place. So in this case, if the body was in the water and had been under there for, let's say, 7 days, hypothetically, then, of course, you're going to have animal activity potentially. feeding off of the body, unfortunately. And then eventually, as the body resurfaces, you may have secondary problems with animals. And that always complicates the forensic side of this thing, because you could lose immediately any kind of forensics evidence right off the bat once the body hits the water. And then you add the animal activity, you add the heat, you add the sun. It becomes pretty rapid. A body can decompose very quickly, probably within 7 to 10 days in these types of circumstances.
There's an aspect to this, and it's understandable. Look, in every case, and there's a lot of questions here, but in a lot of cases, the family wants to know immediately what happened here, rightfully so. Do family members, if they're conducting parallel investigations, does that help law enforcement? Do they work together? Is it a challenge in coordinating information and resources? Because look, I've seen before family members, the public, friends, they can sometimes find things out that law enforcement can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key, right, Jesse? I mean, where they have to be communicating with law enforcement so that there aren't parallel crossovers. Because that then complicates an investigation, because of the investigators, if they find some, let's say, incriminating evidence and the family is just pushing and pushing and pushing, sometimes there's a strategy that you want to utilize, without tipping off that you have that information. So as long as that information is being shared collectively, and the agencies that are the point of the spear should have a liaison with that family, so those lines don't get crossed and that communication doesn't get screwed up.
Okay, I want to talk about this new update. So months after Giovani's body was found in that retention pond, authorities finally have a medical determination about how this teenager died. The autopsy report that was obtained by People confirms that the cause of death was drowning and the manner of death was listed as accidental. Quote, although some autopsy findings may be obscure due to the advanced decomposition, there was no evidence of significant ante-mortem trauma. So in other words, there were no gunshot wounds, there was no stab wounds, there were no other signs of a violent attack. The examiner added that video evidence supported that conclusion. Quote, no other person caused his death. And the toxicology results revealed a, quote, small amount of ethanol in Giovani's liver tissue, but the examiner clarified that this was consistent with decomposition. And the report also highlighted a serious underlying medical condition, by the way, that Giovani had, quote, an extremely rare congenital coronary artery abnormality that is disproportionately associated with heart failure or sudden cardiac death, particularly during physical exertion. Now, while the medical examiner noted that this condition contributed to the death, quote, it cannot be completely excluded, drowning was determined to be the primary cause. And also, I will say that the wildlife, which we talked about, wildlife also affected this scene as well. The examiner wrote that when Giovani's body was found, an alligator was reportedly scavenging his remains. There were claw marks and other markings that were found that were consistent with alligator scavenging. It's a really horrible thing to be thinking about here, Chris, but your reaction to that, to this cause and manner of death?
Yeah, I mean, this is a sad situation where, whenever you have a young, vibrant life who is just on the cusp of taking off, and conquering the world, for lack of a better term, and now all of a sudden he's found in a retention pond, off the freeway in Florida, there's always going to be those questions that a family is going to ask in relationship to, why and how, right? And so the whys become really important here. And any kind of evidence that the investigation would reveal that showed that why. And when you do get the autopsy report like you're talking about, and you do a comparative analysis against the why that you already know about, sometimes that helps, but sometimes it doesn't for families. It's a very difficult, transition in acceptance that the reality potentially could be what it is.
Just to be clear, though, should we feel confident in this conclusion? In other words, if there were signs that he was attacked, beat up, stabbed, shot, something like that, it would be apparent, right? I mean, the question becomes, how confident can we be that there were no signs of external trauma, that this was a drowning, and that this was an accident? Look, they talk about this, there's other aspects of this case, other evidence that would help to make that determination, but do you feel fairly confident in that is what has happened? It's a tragedy, but at the end of the day, if we're not looking at this as a homicide investigation anymore, how confident are you in this finding?
Well, you don't want to, you know, prescribe before you diagnose, right? Sometimes, you know, you try to fit circumstances to what you think you're looking at. So in this situation, the fact that there's, you know, alligator activity, okay, well, how will that complicate if there was trauma to the body? Okay, and then you add the dynamic of the body being under the water as long as it was. And so there you want to really press the last individuals or the last pattern of life of this young man. And you really want those individuals, I know there are 3 individuals in this particular case, you want to go back and potentially, you know, have them walk you through a recreation. You know, what did you see? How did you see it? How was he acting? What were you doing? Those kind of things. And, you know, the fact that a knife was brought up into the scenario, you know, you really want to narrow that down in this investigation. And then you take those facts back to the medical examiner's office and say, look, you know, we've dug a little bit more here. Does this change any of the findings that you've discovered during the autopsy process?
But in terms of anybody else's responsibility, that's closed, right? That's closed at this point.
You know, it's never closed, right? A death investigations, they never close. I mean, officially they close. But if something else resurfaces that shows, you know, that there was a specific intent to hurt this kid, then that case could be reopened tomorrow. You know, there's other factors here, the fact that he was potentially smoking some type of narcotics, but there's no indication maybe that it's in his system. Well, you know, that could be explained also, the fact that the body was under the water again. It doesn't mean, you know, there wasn't something in that particular product. So you want to narrow that down and really find out what exactly he was doing.
And it really just, when I was reading it, it paints a picture of how terrifying his last moments probably were. And you couple it with this idea that they found this heart issue that may have contributed to potentially an inability to prevent drowning, an inability to fight the water, and what might have happened. The fact that they've noted that, I thought, was pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I had a case actually in 1991, believe it or not, where a kid was picked up and taken out fishing, and only one of the 2 fishermen came back, and he had a medical issue as well. And you know, when he surfaced after about 10 days in a harbor where, you know, my old agency, the autopsy came back inconclusive, the cause of death. But the more we investigated, the more we pressed, we discovered that he was actually hit with a fish hook out in the water during an altercation with the suspect. And so those are the kind of things where on the surface it looks like everything is cut and dry, but the more you dig, you know, potentially there could be some, you know, suspicious and or dangerous activity taking place. So I'm really bothered by the fact that there was a knife that was presented in this situation, and that there were narcotics potentially involved, and that he was just dropped off in the middle of the freeway. Those are 3 indicators of really suspicious activity.
I want your opinion about something else. So Giovanni's mom, Bridget, provided a heartbreaking update on her Facebook page saying that she couldn't process this latest news in her own way because she was bombarded with information and questions. She wrote, quote, "Yesterday, the toxicology report came back. Before I could collect myself enough to leave work, strangers had already posted my son's report online, making a decision to share the most graphic and intimate details before I even opened the email. It stole the chance for me to tell my kids myself and the last moments of my life before my brain chemistry changed forever by what I was about to read. Instead, I found out through screenshots, voicemails, and texts, followed by reporters asking me about details I hadn't even seen yet. Even though that violation and cruelty, I'm reminded why we fight to keep Giovani's story alive. Because through that fight came blessings and reminders of the power of Giovani's impact on this world. From the generous donations that covered his autopsy, cremation, and a beautiful celebration of life, to the community that came to walk beside me to search for him, the strangers who became family, broken relationships being healed, and a powerful outpouring of love that helped hold us up. I've stayed quiet about the death threats, the harassment, the lies, and the endless reminders of how much I failed as a mother. Grief is already heavy enough. Watching people forget there are real humans on the other side of the screen has been devastating. There are no words for what it feels like to grieve a child while the world watches, or how violated I feel from those actions. Thankfully, there are words for the gratitude I feel for every message, call, and post from those who continue to lift us up during the darkest chapter of our lives. When I find the strength to carry this pain, I'll be back. So just let me say here, our thoughts, our prayers are with Giovani's family during this incredibly difficult time. We hope that these latest answers are going to provide some clarity, some comfort, as now they're grieving a young man who is gone too soon. Chris, the pain never goes away, right? But they now have answers to some degree. But you also hear how the real life impact this has on someone's family and how they have to navigate this. And it is unfair. It is unfortunate that all this information comes out and not even time to process it, not even a time to respond, and that they weren't first informed of this. Is that something you see where law enforcement doesn't contact the family first and say, listen, before we release anything, we're going to contact you first so you're aware? Is that strange to you?
The fact that the public had it before the family is never a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and when we hear what Mom is saying here, she's talking about her whole senses and her whole life being rewired and the chemicals change within inside of her body. Unfortunately, I can speak with authenticity. I understand where that mother's coming from. My wife and I lost a child in 2003 who was 20 years old in an accident. So I know exactly the depth of pain that she's describing there and projecting to the world. And to your point, Jesse, it is a responsibility of not only law enforcement, but all the authorities involved in this to make sure that that family is taken care of first. Everything else will fall into place, after that. And so if they hadn't done that, then yeah, she has every right in the world to question, why in the world does the world know about this and we don't? And, sometimes, through the healing process, we're, not to interject myself into this conversation, but I've been where this family is. My wife and I have been there. And I thought I understood what that pain felt like, working homicide, as long as I have. And I didn't. I thought I did, but I did not. And until it happened to our family. And so I have a lot of empathy for families it changed my life to help see through the lens that perhaps they're seeing through. And I think it helped me to be more empathetic to families that potentially don't have the right answers, or maybe the answers are there, and then guide them through why we came to that conclusion as an investigation.
Well, first of all, Chris, I didn't know about that. I am so sorry.
I don't talk about it very often, and I apologize for dropping it on you. But
no, first of all, I'm so sorry. But second of all, appreciate you sharing that. And if Giovani's family is listening, I have to imagine they're going to appreciate you sharing that as well. So that is a very important message. I will also say, when you hear that, when you hear what his mother had to say, the idea of this harassment, these threats, just all of this coming out, it is so sad and disturbing, to say the least. So let me just wrap this up by saying this is a tragic situation. We may never have all the answers as to what exactly happened, but at least there is some part of this story that they can close the book on. And we're wishing them the best. Chris Madonna, I'm wishing you and your family the best. And thank you for taking the time to talk about this. Really appreciate it.